Today I'm going to be reacting to every single Warhammer 40k faction re-explained by Bricky. Please support his content, and the original video will be in the description. Thank you. Welcome to A Christian Reacts. And if you like what you see, please consider a like and subscription, as that really helps the video out, and share it to all platforms and even to yourself, because that really helps the video out. But so the way I differentiate myself is I do bring biblical commentary and scriptures that are pertaining to the subject at hand. So that's what sets me apart from all the other reactors. And I also react to the video as well. So it's a mixture of scripture commentary of the topic and then some reaction. So there we go. So let's go ahead and get started.
In the kind brightness of the far past, there was no war. Our galaxy was, for a long time, fairly empty and quiet. The first known species to appear during this time are known only as the Old Ones, cosmic.
If a tree falls down and nobody's there to hear it, is there a tree at all? Sorry. I probably said that wrong.
Across the galaxy with ease and seeded life through the stars. Shortly thereafter, a new species began to arise. The Necron tier. Evolving under the harshness of a devastatingly powerful star, the short-lived and irradiated Necron tier try to find the secret to eternal life and to be free.
Also, I do want to get this out there. So when I look down at this is what I find scriptures on, the tablet. That's what I'm doing, right? I'm not trying to disrespect the content creator or anything like that. I'm just trying to find the verses that are pertaining to the subject at hand.
Freed from their terrible existence. As they expand through the stars, they find the Old Ones and they plead to them to share the secrets of the universe and grant them purchase from their short and painful existence. The Old Ones respond with a lol and a lamau, and with their immense power, they force them back to their homeworld. The Necron tier, filled with rage and hatred, make it their duty to get revenge on the Old Ones. A revenge that would come swiftly as a chance encounter with other gods.
So real quick, before I do that one, I'm going to bring up, this is in the book of Adam and Eve. This is chapter 13. And you kind of get a glimpse of what happened to Satan, right? And I would consider these Satans, right? These chief ones, the Old Ones per se, right? And I do believe at least two of them are Seraphim, or Satan in this Assyrian character that I talked about in the last video, right? And Isaiah 14 calls the Assyrian a Seraphim, literally a fiery serpent, right? And of course, Satan is a seraphim, not a cherubim. Cherubims are never described as serpents or dragons, right? But seraphim literally means fiery serpent. So, there we go. But anyways. So when God, who was merciful, full of pity, heard Adam's voice, he said to him, by the way, the book of Adam and Eve, from what I've read, agrees a lot with the Bible. The Cave of Treasures, I don't know. But at least this does. But anyways. Oh, Adam, so long as the good angel was obedient to me, I believe this is Satan, a bright light rested on him and on his hosts. But when he transgressed my commandment, I deprived him of that bright nature and he became dark. And when he was in the heavens, and now pay attention to this, in the realm of light, so now there's also a realm of darkness. He knew nothing of darkness. But he transgressed, and I made him fall from heaven unto the earth. And it was this darkness that came over him. So it's starting to affect him. Kind of like you would think of the warp. So, very interesting. This happened to his hosts as well. So this darkness
gave them a solution. These other gods were known as the Khorne, a race of highly powerful star-consuming entities. Do not fear, young mortals, for we, the Khorne, will provide you with the immortality you seek. Come now, won't you shake a poor sinner's hand? Quoted from Mephitron, the Deceiver. The Necron tier accepted the Khorne's offer of immortality.
So in the Book of Enoch, I believe it's chapter 69. It talks about, and I've talked about this the last videos I did, but talks about these 5 chief ones. And what are they doing? They're going to mankind and they're showing them all these stuff like enchantments and war and stuff like that. They're showing them all this stuff, kind of like what's happening here. They're promising, stuff for their worship, pretty much. But anyways.
But believe it or not, this turned out to be a ruse. A trick. The C'tan crafted gigantic furnaces and began the process of biotransference. The Necron tier willingly walked line by line into the furnace.
Your necrodermis is showing.
Engines made by gods who devour stars and had their souls consumed instead. The short-lived, irradiated, and cancer-inflicted race of the Necron tier ceased to be, and the immortal, soulless Necrons remained. Now backed by the immense power of the C'tan, the Necrons rally against the Old Ones, and the...
Alright, so here's something. So the Rephaim. Let's go Strong's. So this is from the Rephaim, Strong's Concordance H7497. So it is an inhabitant of East of Jordan, a giant, inhabitants of East of Jordan, and then this is the Strong's Concordance. From Rapha, in sense of invigorating a giant. A giant, Rephaim. Okay, let's go to the root word, Rapha, which means to mend, to cure, to repair, to heal, physician, repair, thoroughly, make whole. That's interesting. So these Rephaim are what you would call the undead. So, very interesting. And then, of course, I'll bring that up here in a second.
Conflict in the stars at this time is known as the War in Heaven. Despite creating various races and entities to aid them in this battle, the Old Ones are overwhelmed and eradicated down to the last, due to the sheer power of the C'tan fat off the souls of the Necron tier, and with an army of unthinkable
Okay, so Job 26:5. Dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. So there's inhabitants under the water. But that are, and it says dead things are formed. Very interesting.
Robotic slaves at their behest. However, the C'tan are greedy, spiteful gods, and when there was no foe worth killing, they turn on each other. The Necrons then put their sights towards the C'tan and lay waste to them, securing their freedom. The once subservient Necrons now control their former masters. Worn out and weakened by these wars, the Necrons, under their leader Zarek, the Silent King, lie dormant.
And now they're like Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all. Pokemon.
With a plan to eventually wake
I was going to say something.
Control
anyways,
over
we won't
the
go
galaxy. There. Over millions of years, empires rise and they fall. The species created by the Old Ones have footholds over the galaxy, but on a pale blue dot in the thick of all this conflict, humanity begins to evolve. And for the most part, the basic path of humanity's evolution remains the same as it is now for almost 15,000 years. Right now, in the 21st century, this is canon. You
eat, sleep, booty call, and repeat.
Right now, Twitch streamer reacting to this video, you existed at a point in the Warhammer universe. But
not a Twitch streamer, thank you very much.
Humanity's ambition and the power of their technology becomes unmatched, and the golden age of expansion begins. Humanity starts to branch out through the stars with powerful tools used for agriculture, mining, and expansion. Some branches of humanity would eventually settle far away from Earth itself, and around this time, the psychic ability of humans are greatly expanded, and what we begin to know as psychers appear. But despite all the progress, things would begin to collapse. The machines created to aid humanity would turn on them in M23, an event known as the Cybernetic Revolt, and trade would begin to collapse due to the immaterial warp, aka...
And you do have, of course, sorcerers in the Bible, right? Talks about them a lot. And then, of course, you got the opposite of what would be in, a prophet, somewhat. Or, yeah, a prophet. And a prophet can mean someone who brings the word of God and preaches or whatever. And that can also mean who just speaks the will of God, basically, right? And, one of them, Elijah, was it? It might have been Isaiah. Gosh darn it. Anyways, let me look that up so I can get you the correct information on that.
Actual hell beginning to cause ruptures in space and time.
It was Elijah
These warp
who brought down
separate.
It was Elijah who brought down fire from heaven. So, anyways, which is the opposite of what a sorcerer is, right?
Humanity, and this would be what is known as the Age of Strife. The warp, a sea of souls, storing all thought, emotion, and the souls of those who have passed on, begin fluctuating into something terrible, as far on the horizon, something horrendous was brewing. You see, the warp isn't just a random assortment of chaotic energy. It is fairly well organized, thanks to those living in the galaxy. The warp itself acts as an afterlife of sorts, and the actions of the innumerable amount of creatures who live in the galaxy have manifested a pantheon of All
right. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Okay. So this is Job 10, 20 through 21. Are not my days few? Cease then and let me alone, and I may take comfort a little. Before I go whence, I shall not return, even to the land of darkness and the shadow of death. A land of darkness is darkness itself, and of the shadow of death, without any order, and where the light is as darkness. That's interesting. That would be, the I guess in Norse mythology, they have Niflheim and stuff like that. Pretty much that, right? And what's interesting is the goddess Hel is where we get the English word for hell from, which is interesting. And she is in the Bible. She's known as the Deep. But anyways, or I probably should bring that up. But
organized entities known as the Forces of Chaos. At their helm are three major entities, Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch. However, a fourth one, Slaanesh, was about to be born. The ancient Eldar were one of the first species created by the Old Ones, and due to their extreme and unbridled
So this is Ezekiel 31:14. The waters made him great. The deep set him up on high with her rivers running about his plants. This is talking about the Assyrian, that Assyrian character that I was talking about, right? But anyways, so that deep, not every time you see the deep, but a lot of times when you see this deep, it's talking about Tiamat, or this Leviathan character. I'll bring that up. It's called the Dragon of the Sea.
The birthing of Slaanesh tore a hole in the galaxy and forever split the Eldar into those of the Craftworld, who sought to bring their species back together, and those of the Drukari, who wished to continue what caused the birth of Slaanesh in the first.
Okay, so Isaiah 27:1. In the day of the Lord, with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. So, very interesting. Anyways. And when you see Hela, in Genesis 1:2, it says darkness was upon the face of the deep. And you'll see Hela's face is halfway darkened. Very interesting.
place. The birthing of this fourth chaos god settled the warp storms of the Imperium and ended the age of strife, but humanity was still fractured. So one man revealed himself and spearheaded an immense attempt to reunite all the fractured pieces of humanity. That man was the Emperor of Mankind. After reclaiming the nearly destroyed Earth, the Emperor embarked on the unification wars to unite humanity under
the guy who did not want to become a god became a god.
banner of the Imperium of Man. However, due to the very long and devastating impact of the Age of
Supposedly,
Strife, humanity as we know
don't know.
is not the same. To reconquer Earth, the Emperor would need more than mere men. Great beings, known as the Thunder Warriors, were recruited by the Emperor to reclaim the Earth with ease. But these warriors are a blunt tool and had, overstayed their welcome. He would need something better. And that solution would be known as the Space Marines. Superhuman soldiers that will have the skill and cunning exponentially greater than the mortal man.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the good mighty men, and then we'll get into Genesis 6 when it talks about the chaos Space Marines. Where is it? Right here. Okay. Zechariah 10:5, and they shall be as mighty men, which tread down their enemies in the mire of the streets in the battle. And they shall fight, because the Lord is with them, and the riders on the horses shall be confounded. So, there you go. God has his mighty men.
These new warriors would be commanded by an elite group of his very own sons known as the Primarchs. Unfortunately, though, Daddy didn't charge the baby monitor, and his 18 sons would be stolen by the forces of chaos and scattered across the galaxy. This would begin the Great Crusade, a monumental task to take back the stars in the name of humanity and reclaim the lost Primarch sons. However, he would need the fires of industry to make this happen. Looking to the distant cousins of Mars, the Emperor signed a treaty with the technologically irradiated hellscape of the Red Planet and allowed.
So, of course, God had his own little crusade, right? But the Christian church does not teach well on this, right? It looks like Israel is just going in and conquering and being genocidal, right? But that's not the case. What's going on is he's fighting against these. In Genesis 6, right? We'll talk about this when the Chaos Space Marines comes up. Talks about how the sons of God came down, mated with women, and created these giants, right? These are your demons, basically. But, and other beings as well. Nephilim, they're called the Nephilim, right? It's an umbrella term, which just means the fallen ones. But, where was I going with that? Anyways, I lost my track of thought. Anyways, once I find it, I'll let you know.
Of the machine god, the Mechanicum, to supply his crusade.
Oh, so that's who Israel was battling against, right? When the 12 spies went into Israel, what did they say? They said we were like grasshoppers in their sight, right? And of course, you have David and Goliath, who was a giant, right? And this is all in you can look up Genesis 6. It says, literally says, and giants were in the earth in those days, and also after that. So that's what Israel was going up against. These weird-looking evil guys. Plus, there were humans in there, right? But a lot were just these Nephilim tribes, right? And God said he wanted a horse to mate with a horse, not a horse with a human, right? And that's what was going on, this hybridization. They were terraforming the earth into their image, basically.
While Space Marines were the tip of the spear, their numbers paled to the vast might of the Imperial Army and Navy. The Astra Militarum and their seemingly endless numbers make up the bulk of the fighting force for humanity, supplied by the intelligence and prowess of various agents of the Imperium, such as rogue traders and assassins. Due to the lack of connectivity between the worlds, what a society had become over thousands of years became mysterious and varied. Tools, once used for harvesting and agriculture, now are being used as machines of war in the form of imperial knights. Some of these fractures of humanity would even be changed further and become unrecognizable to the average human, with differences in size, skin color, appendages, cat ears, sometimes. Some would go so far to become their own galactic societies, like the miners of
I wouldn't be surprised if Bricky had some of those headphones with the cat ears on it. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
the galactic core and their immense
Not saying
supercomputers,
anything, just,
forming the
he just
Leagues
seems
of
like one of those
Votan.
people that would
After an
have some.
incredible amount of effort and books, the lost sons of the Emperor would be reunited, and the Imperium of Man would be firmly established. This, however, would not last. Be it intentional or accidental, the Emperor would not reveal to his sons the true nature of the galaxy and the terrors of the warp. And this oversight would result in one of the most impactful wars in humanity's history. The favorite son of the Emperor, Horus, would fall to the powers of chaos and turn on his father. This betrayal, this backstabbing, this heresy, this Horus Heresy would result in a split in the Imperium with devastating consequences. Half of the Emperor's loyal sons would fall to chaos and become the Chaos Space Marines, along with the forces of the Dark Mechanicum and the Chaos Knights. The conflict would result in the absolute obliteration of Horus and the physical death of the Emperor himself. The near-dead body of the Emperor would be placed on the Golden Throne to serve as a beacon of humanity and allow.
So I would consider Horus this character called Lucifer, right? Now, I'm going to show you here that Lucifer is a man, that he's not Satan. I know I say this every video, but this isn't taught. I don't know what happened, but anyways, we won't get into that. So let's go to verse 16, right? So you got 14. I will send above the heights of the clouds, right? And talking about Lucifer, or verse 12, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. We'll get into that, but anyways, verse 16. They shall see thee, they that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake the kingdoms? This man here is Osiris, Saturn, Kronos. In my opinion, they're all the same guy, right? And you'll see here, Lucifer, son of the morning. This is Hallel ben Shahar in Hebrew. Shahar is a Canaanite god of the dawn. I don't think Satan is the son of a Canaanite god. But anyways, this is where the rebellion happened, right? So right here. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He that ruled the nations in anger. There's nations, by the way. Isn't that interesting? Is persecuted and none hindereth. The whole earth is at rest and quiet, and they break forth into singing. And the Lord this is verse 5. And the Lord had broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. That's interesting. So there's this rebellion happening, right? And this is where I believe, like, the angels fell and all that. And then where in Adam and Eve, where Satan becomes dark and stuff like that, right? Probably a little bit before that when all that happened. But Satan is the one who stirred it. And then that's when this rebellion happened, in my opinion. But anyways.
Allow for the continued ability to travel the stars, protected by his most loyal, the Adeptus Custodes. The Imperium would be vulnerable during this age of rebirth, and Terra would find itself under siege by one of the most formidable species in the galaxy, the Orcs. As time went on and memories of the Emperor's vision began to fade, the Emperor would become less of a head of state and more of a religious figure. And the Imperium would change to reflect this. The leadership on a planet would be at the behest of the High Lords of Terra, and their actions would be courtesy of the incomparable power and authority of the Inquisition. The zealots of the
Emperor protects.
Imperium would intensify and create a brand new era known as the Age of Apostasy. And this ecclesiarchal command of the Imperium would end up with one of the strongest fighting forces of Terra, the Adeptus Sororitas. Over time, this age would come to pass, and we would approach the 40th millennium of Warhammer 40,000. which, you guessed it, would come with its own form of problems. A primitive species once found during a recon mission would be able to evolve in relative secrecy for 6,000 years, becoming a highly advanced coalition of aliens known as the Tau Empire. And if the threats of the galaxy weren't bad enough, there are threats from outside the galaxy.
So, real quick, with the Adeptus Sororitas, in the Bible, Miriam, Aaron's sister, was a prophetess, and then you also see Deborah, who was a prophetess as well, and commanded Israel. She was a judge. Everybody went to her for commandment, right, on what God wanted to do and all that stuff, and she was directing the military and stuff like that as well, even though they were being oppressed, but she was still getting the job done. And her name is Deborah. I think people should look at her and see that women are capable of leading. And God isn't the misogynist that you think he is. But anyways, it's Judges 4:4 if you want to check that out.
Tendrils around the Milky Way, the Tyranids, monsters that serve a psychic hive mind and present tactics previously unseen in the Milky Way. Be it a direct.
And of course, if you want to check that out, that's I brought up the locusts that come from the bottomless pit. I would liken these to the Tyranids pretty much, somewhat.
Direct assault with their monstrous bug-like presence, or through
They're
the
not
more
helicopters,
gene
by the
stealer
way.
cults. The presence of yet another threat in the galaxy is proving to be overwhelming to the Imperium. In the 41st millennium, there is no peace among the stars. At any point, your life can and will be threatened by the Xenos races uncountable, or by the arch enemy of chaos within, or by the decroded terror that is the Imperium itself.
And you get done with one war, another war happens. Get done with that war, another war happens. Get done with that war, and another war happens. That's basically Warhammer 40k in a nutshell.
It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. Forget the power of technology and science, or the safety of promise and understanding. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
Darn, I probably shouldn't have brought all those up just yet, huh? Great. That's what I'm saying right now. I blew my load too soon.
A fantastic job once again, Mr. Kurz, the Night Haunter himself. Oh, didn't you love that, my faithful audience? Once again, we have another criminal over the course of 6 hours break every single bone in his body. And with that, once again, our glorious leader has brought the crime rate to 0%. Always brought to you here on Nostroman News. I'm your host, Bricky. Thank you once again for joining us. Our top stories for tonight. The weather forecast appears to be rainy with extra dark, so make sure you pack those extra batteries for your lamp packs. And of course, let's not forget the
and your babies with wings with exo arms and basically cherubs, and then maybe have a baby stick right here, you know. That's the grimdark.
Fantastic gang violence problem we're currently having. Oh, I'm sorry. What's that? Oh, right. It's gone. It's looking to be a chilly one tonight as well, so make sure your skin capes are nice and tight. Wait, hold on, one moment. No.
Drukari?
Adamantium reserves have tripled? Wait, I'm sorry. Self-harm rates have gone down to 0%. The Night Haunter
that fits perfectly.
Smiled?
Do you smell what the rock is cooking?
No. This could only mean one thing. It is the Nostroman News.
That men who use emojis are not men. They're not Sigma.
It's a great privilege to bring some color back in your
life. I've actually been told
with the
that.
Brand new 3-part Gamer Subs drop exclusively on this here news network. That's right, your esteemed host Bricky, myself, is dropping a 3-part Gamer Subs release for pre-order available now. Nostroman News, and let us move on to our next scheduled program. 5 years ago, I made every Warhammer 40k faction explained, a passion project of mine for a universe that I enjoyed so much.
I really wish I didn't blow my load too soon. Great. Now I'm gonna have to find content.
Its main purpose was to be a drawbridge, the separation between the layman who had only ever seen the big armored blue man situated neatly next to a Wetzel's Pretzels, and then the hardcore Warhammer lore nerd. That was just too wide, and there was nothing bridging these two together. Since 2020, Warhammer has exploded in popularity thanks to COVID, quality game updates, and a few excellent video games, and a couple miniseries. The sheer volume of people who have told me they have
Got me into it. Well, I got into it because of Dark Tide. Oh, what a disaster. Great gameplay, but it launched really bad with nothing to it. So that's my experience of coming to Warhammer. That was like 2 years ago. And that's after that is when I started doing the Warhammer 40k lore and the Bible stuff. But anyways.
purchased miniatures due to that video alone makes me feel as if Games Workshop owes me commission. However, that video is incomplete. I was not a casual fan, but I was also not a hardcore lore junkie. In the 5 years since that video's release, multiple channels have sprouted up, and the drawbridge between casual to the obsessed has never been wider or easier to traverse. Even I, myself, have been a part of Adeptus Ridiculous, a podcast teaching lore in a much simpler and condensed form. Needless to say, I've learned a lot. Warhammer is so much more than just Spaceman shoots big gun. It has also grown substantially from its origins, being a Warhammer fantasy spin-off just in space. Now, it is a black library filled with immensely deep characters, difficult themes, and even some tear-jerking stories.
Vulcan lives. Just saying.
It is a backdrop for a million stories over a million worlds, and I did not see its true depth in 2020. But now, I'd like to share what I've learned. We just had a brief summary of the world and each faction that takes place during it. And we did that because to truly understand each faction, we must understand what makes them the way they are. And to do so, we need to begin in chronological order, discussing their origins, their culture, their powers, and of course, what makes them oh so grimdark. So let's begin with the group that started it all and sing praise to the infinite empire.
Necrons.
As mentioned before, the Necron tier were the original form of the Necrons, an alien race far away from us that lived short, painful lives due to the...
Of course, that's the in the Bible would be, or kind of like them, would be the Rephaim. These are the undead, basically, right? Undead giants. You have Og of Bashan, right? The last of the Rephaim, or the remnant of them. So, and that's who Israel was battling. These Rephaim and the Zanzarmenes and stuff like that, right? And the Anakim as well. But anyways, they are these undead.
The irradiation of their star. Normally this would manifest as like a sort of cancer, a space cancer of sorts. The Necrons are very much inspired by the ancient Egyptian aesthetic, but unlike the windswept dunes commonly associated with it, the irradiated hellscape the Necrons here endured was far from picturesque. This also translates into their hierarchy. They are a race of nobles and peasants. Most of the peasants would often live for their very short amount of...
And in my opinion, I would consider Lucifer a quote-unquote Rephaim type being, because you see in a lot of his lore, right, or mythology of Osiris, Saturn, Kronos, all that stuff, there's a lot of resurrection happening, right? Especially with the Osiris story. You know, with him being cut up into 13 pieces, and then that 14th piece is sitting in the Washington Monument, but we won't get into that. It's basically his genitalia, but that's what the obelisk is a symbol of. So, yeah, there you go.
Time, only a couple of decades, while the nobles tended to have better care and would live a little bit longer. But
and in my opinion, I do gotta say this, I believe Lucifer is the beast of Revelation. Because it says he goes down into the pit in Isaiah 14. And then it says the beast comes up from the pit. And he talks just like Lucifer, right? And he acts just like him too. So, in my opinion, Lucifer is the beast of Revelation.
Still far less than the average lifespan of a human, even today in the 21st century. The leader of the Necrons was Zarek, the Silent King. He was the one who took the deal with the Catan and the Deceiver. Of course, he wasn't aware of the fact that they were known as the Deceiver at the time, but the whole species was blinded by hate after being debased by the Old Ones on their quest to cure their illness. The sheer pain
that kind of happened with the humans. I'll bring up first Enoch
that
here.
underwent the Necron race can't be understated, as their fear was manic. The Catan are, of course, gods that eat stars, and when the leader of your species tells you to march into the gigantic green furnaces to ascend to immortality, you march. The scenes from these are long lines of both the peasantry and nobles.
Okay, so it is First Enoch chapter 69. So we'll see here. And these are the chiefs of their angels in their names. So these are the chief guys, the kings, right? And their chief ones over hundreds and over 50s and over 10s. In Revelation, it talks about the 7 kings, right? 5 are fallen. Well, guess how many are mentioned here? 5, right? So the name of the first is Jaquan, the one who led astray the sons of God and brought them down to earth and led them astray with the daughters of men. So this is the guy who taught, who manipulated the sons of God in Genesis 6 to come down and mate with women, right? The second was named Espiel. He imparted the holy sons of God, evil counsel, and led them astray that they defiled their bodies with the daughters of men. And the third was named Gadriel. He showed the children of men all the blows of death and led astray Eve. Now, this isn't Satan here. This is a different thing. And showed the weapons of death to the sons of men, and the shield and the coat of mail and sword for battle, and all the weapons of death to the children of men. So you see, they're teaching this stuff, right? For knowledge and power and stuff as well. So there you go.
Clutching their loved ones in a frantic act to save their own lives. Many of them already inflicted in the late stages of the space cancer, some of them crawling into the biotransference furnaces, trying to outrace death itself, without realizing death was the one who made these to begin with. What came out the other side was a soulless husk. And I say that literally. A soul is not an abstract concept like it is in our world, an immaterial version of oneself discussed and debated in religion and philosophy. No, in Warhammer, a soul is a real, tangible item of oneself. And the Catan...
By the way, those 5 I was talking about, I would consider like at least up there with the Catan, per se, in biblical sense.
Basically were just like to every single person who went in their furnaces. If you were a peasant, you came out a Necron warrior, and you as an individual have ceased to be. You have no mind, you have no soul, and your body, as you know it, is made of an extremely advanced mass of re-knitting living metal known...
What's interesting in the Bible, in Revelations, after it says they will give their power one day with the beast or whatever, and it says they have one mind. But what's interesting is it says, or I don't know if it's in that scripture or it might be in a little bit somewhere in Revelation. It talks about how that they will wish for death, but death will flee from them, right? That they will try to end, but they won't be able to. So imagine getting put into something like this, but yet you're soulless and you don't have control, all the control that you used to have, and you're being pushed kind of in the back and you're just stuck there, right? Wouldn't you want to be ended? You know what I mean? But you won't be able to. But anyways, just something to think about.
as necrodermis. You cannot think for yourself, for you do not have a brain to think with. All you do now is await protocols from your overlords, which are the nobles who came out of the furnaces with their minds intact. Not their souls, mind you, but their minds are very much intact. These nobles...
Okay, here it is. I'm sorry. So Revelation 9:6. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to be deleted, and deletion shall flee from them, or death shall flee from them. Very interesting.
Now have command protocols, and they are able to command all of their peasantry and do with them whatever they wish. Zarek, the Silent King, is the most advanced of all the Necrons, a perfect metallic version of himself with incredible power and intelligence. His strength allowed him to lead the undead and the unthinking armies of the Necrons to battle against the Khorne when they were at their weakest due to their incessant infighting, and then win back their freedom. But gods cannot die. So in reality, what occurred is the Khorne were shattered into thousands of pieces, and each shard of their god was trapped in a stasis vault and mind controlled to do the bidding of the Necrons they once enslaved.
Gotta catch 'em all. I keep wanting to say the perverted form of that, but I won't. Anyways.
The biggest challenge
I almost said it
now
again.
Are actually the upstarts of the galaxy. The Eldar and the Orcs were quite prominent, and as you can imagine, a galactic war really takes its toll on the joints, or I guess the servos. It was in their best interest to wait out the galactic rise of the other races and come back at a more opportune time. So they went into stasis via these massive tomb complexes hidden beneath various worlds, biding their time until it was once again their opportunity to rule the galaxy. Zarek, the Silent King, as penance for his failure to his people, exiled himself into the darkness between stars for the next 60 million years, with his perfect memory a constant reminder of the doom he inflicted upon his people. Flash forward to the modern day, and the Necrons are reawakening, but
Okay, so this is in the Septuagint, right? This is Isaiah 13:3. KJV says something totally different, but I kind of agree with this one, the Septuagint one. So, I give command, I bring them. Giants are coming to fulfill my wrath, rejoicing at the same time insulting, to come from a land far off, from the utmost foundation of heaven, which is interesting. And the Lord and his warriors are coming to destroy all the world. So that would be the day of the Lord. That, and I did a short, which I forgot to bring up at the beginning, but I do Warhammer 40k Lore in the Bible shorts, if you want to check those out. I did an Exterminatus one talking about the Day of the Lord. But anyways, this is getting too long.
It isn't working as well as it could be. Whether the tomb world is reawakened naturally or by some imperial moron stepping on a green glowing rock, the Necrons have come back to reclaim a galaxy they consider rightly theirs. But 60 million years of hypersleep have taken their toll. Many Necron dynasties awake with systems unrestored and huge swaths of their population's minds completely lost. Necron nobles wake with various mental faculties compromised, sometimes exhibiting traits similar to excessive paranoia, schizophrenia, or even dementia. One notable Necron, Nemesor Zandrek, believes that he is still back on his home planet fighting off separatists and interlopers. See, Oberyn, the separatists come, attempting to outflank me as they did at the 4th Battle of Vindach. How they calculate that daubing themselves green and roaring like savages will produce a different outcome, I cannot fathom. But it is of no account. Ready, my legions. Another glorious victory shall soon be ours. Other individuals, such as the esteemed Imitek the Stormlord, seek to usurp the newly returned Silent King for right.
I actually did a Warhammer 40k Lore in the Bible on him. And I would consider him, Baal, right? Baal Hadad is the god that the Bible's talking about when it says Baal. Or Hadad or Adad, same thing. And this would be Set, right? Marduk, Zeus, They all, Zeus took out Kronos, Set took out Osiris. You see why I believe these are all the same stories, right? They're all telling the same thing, just through the perspective of their culture and their gods, right? Per se. Now, of course, the Bible, in my opinion, is the one telling the truth on this matter. It's giving you a whole 3D version of it so you can see what's actually going on, in my opinion. But anyways, yeah, I would consider him Baal or this storm god, right? Set, Marduk, all that. All of them are the storm god. You can go look that up.
Ruler over the Necron race, believing his time has come to an end, while scientists and archaeologists like Trajan the Infinite and Orican the Diviner spend thousands of years bickering over artifacts and petty squabbles. Truly, the Necrons are a faction of unthinkable, unimaginable power, held back entirely by their own hubris and 60 million years of stasis. It is a species that does not know of time, only of the ravages brought by it. A pharaoh of a dynasty may just be as frightened to awake completely mad as they are to be assassinated while they sleep. Thousands of years pass in an instant. There is a play, like an opera play, a retelling of the war in heaven in the Necron culture that takes 40 years to witness, because why leave? You have no need to eat or vacate your bowels. You are immortal, but you are soulless. Despite the Necrons' incredible technology, their mastery over time, reality itself, despite all of this, they still are missing a soul. And therein lies the biggest struggle. Most Necrons look to conquest the galaxy, kill the interlopers like the humans, Eldar, and orcs that scrape at a fraction of their power. But the end goal for many, including Zarek himself, is to return the souls to their bodies, to undo the horrible fate he cast upon them. This is not the interest of all.
Get in there. This one won't fit. It's too fat. Sorry.
Many simply wish to rule
I don't know if people
their
will get
dynasty
that
with an iron fist and kill all they consider unworthy. But to many others, it is to undo the decision that doomed them all. Before they can do that, there is a pest that needs exterminating. That is the fundamental understanding of the Necrons. They are so hyper advanced that their science borders on magic. They play with the fundamental aspects of reality and time. Their mastery of the physical galaxy is the strongest in the universe. Their weapons reduce people to the barest molecules, and they have devices capable of causing stars to supernova. They are unfathomably difficult to kill, as if you do fell one of their number, the living metal reknits itself, and the reanimation protocols allow it to come back alive once again. They're masters of teleportation, and often killing a Necron fully will just have its consciousness translocated back.
Have I seen you before?
To their tomb world to await reassembly. Normally they utilize large phalanxes of warriors and honorary combats, but some of them have fallen to various mind viruses. The destroyer cults are hell-bent on killing anything and everyone that lives with an overwhelming force. And then there's the flayed ones, Necrons cursed with I have no mouth and I must scream, a panic attack virus, as the last laugh of Landogo, the Flayer Catan. Slowly losing their minds, they strip apart their foes and adorn their bodies with the skin of their enemies, trying to better return to their old feelings of flesh and blood. The Necrons are
They're wannabe skinwalkers. No, I'm kidding.
A degraded version of their mighty empire, and still one of the biggest threats in the galaxy. The only thing keeping them at bay currently is their awakening sickness and their infighting with no care to the timeline. But they are coming. And
almost like
slowly,
the orcs.
They plan to rid this galaxy of the vermin that inhabit it. My people shackled the stars and broke mortality when the species you sprang from had barely left the slime pools it spawned in. Our wars burned reality, and the dominion of our kings is without limit. The ground you tread on is not yours. It is ours. The war in heaven was a catastrophic time for the galaxy, and as stated in the above quote, burned reality.
That's what she said.
Of course, souls exist in Warhammer, and in the case of the Necrons here, they were consumed by the star gods. This begs the question, however, if you were to pass on, expire, as one might put it, where would your soul go? The answer to this is the warp. In Warhammer, a soul is real. And so is hell, the afterlife, the Imperium, the Sea of Souls, the Imperium. All of these names refer to the dimension parallel to our own, known as the warp. Now,
of course, wish I wouldn't have said this at the beginning, but of course, Job 10:21. Before I go in, shall I not return, even to the land of darkness and the shadow of death? A land of darkness is darkness itself, and the shadow of death without any order, and where the light is as darkness. So that's very interesting. But there's also one that says there are terrors in the darkness, and I'll bring that one up too.
The warp is not like our reality. It does not follow the classic normalcy of time and space. It is defined as the Sea of Souls, and it acts like this in a more literal way than you can realize. To imagine the warp is to imagine the sea itself. Hell is real, and you can surf on it. It has a current and can become more dangerous depending on where you go and how bad the weather is. As the Imperium is a reflection of our reality and of our souls, all thoughts, all emotions, all feeling that goes with a soul is passed on into the warp. If an entire planet decides it's going to engage in a blood-fueled rampage of murder and gore, then the warp around that planet will be affected in a similar manner. It's not something that you can see. It is a parallel, not perpendicular dimension. But it is changing. To expose oneself to the warp for any period of time invites certain death outside of the...
Okay, right here. So Job 24:17. For the morning is to them even as the shadow of death. If one know them, they are in the terrors of the shadow of death.
Most iron-willed of individuals, and to stare into it will drive one mad. Much like the open seas, things dwell in the warp. Whether these beings were always there and were just emboldened by the carnage of the galaxy, we can only speculate at.
There's also Matthew 25:30, which talks about the outer darkness. This is even more interesting, because who knows if it's talking about the shadow of death or another void type place. But cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So that's interesting.
At a time, you could say it was more calm. But a certain faction's galactic war in heaven didn't do it any favors. Now the warp is turbulent, and its realms belong to a pantheon of gods known simply as The forces of chaos are beings that serve directly under their patron deity. There are 4 current gods of chaos at the moment: Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh. Each of them represent various facets of and emotions of sentient species and play a great game against one another for total control over their realms. Interestingly enough, while their disciples have physical forms, we can...
So check this out. So this is First Enoch. It's talking about the 7 archangels. So this is verse 5. Michael, or this is First Enoch chapter 20, verse 5. Michael, one of the holy angels, to wit, he is set over the best part of mankind and over chaos. There's a verse that corroborates that in the scriptures, and I'll find that for you.
Understand the chaos gods do not have a physical visual that you can perceive in reality. So while there are tons of fantastic fan art, we do not know what they truly look like, though they are conveniently color-coded. Khorne is the god of blood and murder.
So I would consider Khorne, this god called Kamesh, or Kamash, however you want to say it, which is also the god of Moloch as well. So he would be like the Moabite and the Ammonite, basically, and they're the same god, pretty much. But anyways, that's what I would consider. He definitely required innocent blood, right, and stuff like that, bones and all that. But anyways, yeah, that's what I would consider Khorne. Moloch, if you want to.
And slaughter. He is the one who is most powered by the wholesale killing of any living thing. For Khorne.
So real quick, this is that scripture that corroborates that Michael scripture in Enoch. Daniel 12:1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to the same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that should be found written in the book. That's Daniel 12:1. So there you go. You got Michael protecting against the chaos, which is interesting.
Cares not from where the blood flows.
And that's when I think the giants in that Septuagint verse, right? Or not Septuagint, but Isaiah 13:3 of the Septuagint translation says that giants are coming back to fulfill his wrath. That these entities and all this stuff that was going on in Israel's day are coming back. Right? And what happened is, where did they go? Right? It's a good question. It says Jesus came. So the whole point was to stop Jesus from being born. Genesis 3:14, right? It says, I will put enmity between thy seed, the serpent seed, and which isn't Cain, by the way. That's nonsense. There's a whole verse that shows that Cain came from Adam and Eve, right? But anyways, and then the seed of the woman, which it says the seed of a woman will bruise the head of the serpent, right? And the serpent seed. And that goes back to Lucifer as well, right? That seed of the serpent. What's interesting in Enoch, in those chapter 69, it talks about at the end the son of the serpent, named Tabiet. So very interesting. Sorry,
With
that was way too long.
Of 8, he is the lord of all things involving killing and blood and gore. The champions are extremely strong as well, with monumental muscles and extremely large weapons. A true analog to Khorne would be his greater demon, the Bloodthirster, an enormous muscle-bound flying devil with an axe so large it splits tanks in a single swing. They move into battle with armor of brass adorned by the skulls of their foes and pools of freshly spilt blood. This may appear to be quite frightening, of course, demonic, one might say. But in the world of chaos, all emotions feed one of these gods in one way or another. If you were to define Khorne with single words, you would use blood, carnage, murder, skulls. But you'd be missing out on important ones like strength, honor, prowess, courage, and skill. Khorne is not just about the wholesale slaughter of people. He is about the honor and power of martial combat. The true strength there is in besting someone in physical strength and skill. Of course, a murderer would be someone who would feed Khorne, but a soldier could feed Khorne. A martial artist or professional
Jimmy crack corn and I don't care.
Fighter could feed Khorne. A warrior, good or bad, feeds Khorne. A diplomat does not. A premier soldier does. A GoFundMe does not. This is what leads many mortals down the path of Khorne, for he will bless those that bring him enough skulls. And in a world this destructive, there are many ways to reap a high tally for him. Prepare the dread claws and unchain the mad ones. Glorious battle awaits us today, for the world below has refused to surrender. Let us descend upon them with fury and rage, giving no quarter and sparing only those warriors who fight well enough to earn a place amongst us. As to the rest, their lives and possessions are ours, but their skulls are for Khorne. Normally, if I ever want to explain...
Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. That's where that comes from.
I just kind of show him this clip.
I'd never stab you in the back, Shepard. Warriors like you and me, straight to the face.
Moving on, Tzeentch is the second god, the god of trickery and mischief, the changer of ways, the great conspirator and the architect of fate.
So there isn't really much about this guy in the Bible. Well, of course, it's Tzeentch in Warhammer 40k, but there is a god, a Roman god called Janus, who is the god of change and seasons and changer of ways, you can say, and stuff like that. And he is also the god of two faces, which is interesting. Now, I don't know if he necessarily has two faces, but he says one thing and another thing happens. So, Very interesting.
The sacred number of 9, Tzeentch is truly the god of change in all of its forms, but there is an obvious undercurrent of mischief and cunning. Tzeentch is such a liar that his pants have gone thermonuclear. His favorite pastime is asking questions that have no answers while simultaneously making up answers on the spot to a question he didn't ask.
Have you ever had a dream that you want
That was me when I first started YouTube, even to this day sometimes.
him to do you so much you could do anything?
He is such a conniving little bastard that every emotion of lying, of scheming, of trickery is a direct way to help feed him. An unfaithful partner, a politician, a spy. All these people feed Tzeentch in one way or another, and it doesn't matter if the intentions are good. Acceptance does not feed Tzeentch. Change does. Tzeentch doesn't care about your facts. He only wants opinions. Because he represents change, he also represents hope, though. Schemes are not always bad, and even the hope to make a better tomorrow is the change he seeks. Because he is the architect of fate and the mastery of sorcery, his presence is purely unknowable. Every depiction of a Tzeentchian demon contains more eyes than are necessary and more mouths than I know what to do with. It is a biblically accurate angel if the angel gaslit you into thinking birds are government drones. But are they? The creatures at his disposal adorn themselves with the knowledge of sorceries and the unknown, all to provide a mind-crushing experience. Fighting demons from outside of our reality is difficult enough, but fighting demons from unreality, purposely attempting to trick you, is a whole new thing entirely. And that is before we even get started on the...
So some of the times in the Bible, you'll see the vultures are gathered there, right? Well, vultures are sometimes used metaphorically to represent demons or evil forces. And let me see if I can find some. There's, of course, when we get to Slaanesh, I'll bring that up, of Isaiah 34, where it talks about the vultures are gathered with her. These are demons, right? And stuff like that. But anyways, I digress. We'll get there with Slaanesh.
Gigantic bird of sorcery you're going to need to face. Do not ask which creature screams in the night. Do not question who...
And then, of course, you got the phoenixes, which would be considered seraphim, right? Burning ones. And that's who I would consider the Assyrian, would be like a phoenix type character, because in Isaiah 14, here, I'll bring that up real quick.
Waits for you in the shadow. It is my cry that wakes you in the night, and my body that crouches in the shadow. I am Tzeentch, and you are the puppet that dances to my tune. Third of the Chaos Gods is the one of acceptance of rot and pestilence, the grandfather himself, Papa Nurgle. Nurgle is the exact opposite of Tzeentch. Where Tzeentch believes in change and hope for a future, Nurgle believes in stagnation and the end of everything.
Okay. So Isaiah 14:29. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because, so this is talking about the Assyrian, right before it talks about the Assyrian, because of the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent, right? And you'll see some of these phoenixes who got these slits in their eyes and then snake tails, right? So very interesting.
At one point,
also in Chinese mythology, you have the dragon and the phoenix dichotomy going on, which would be, in my opinion, Satan and the Assyrian. But anyways.
Or another, we will all decay. We will all rot, and we will all end. And with a sacred number of 7, every single thing, pestilence, boil, and everything in between, comes under the great shadow and girth of Nurgle himself. For Nurgle, the plight of...
Right here. Okay. So, 2 Kings 17, 30. And the men of Babylon made Succobanoth, and the men of Cuth made Nurgle. So who is this Nurgle? So this is Second Kings 17, verse 30. And then we go to the wiki. Nurgle was a Mesopotamian god worshipped through all periods of Mesopotamian history, from early dynasties or dynastic to Neo-Babylonian times. Okay, here we go. He was primarily associated with war, death, and disease, and he has been described as the god of inflicted death. So that's probably where Games Workshop got the name Nurgle.
Mortals is his fear and wine. And no matter how solid life might be, everything will decay in the end. In the creation of life, there must be an end to that life.
And he also may have a connection to, or be, the Beelzebub, right? That entity called Beelzebub. I know people like to, label everything Satan, right? But Satan wasn't the only one who fell, right? We have, Ephesians 6 talks about the principalities, right? We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities, spiritual wickedness in high places, right? Or with principalities, powers, and spiritual wickedness in high places, right? So, there you go. That's Ephesians 6 if you want to check that out. That's the reason why he says we need to put on the armor of God daily.
Nobody has more creations to end lives than Grandfather Nurgle himself. Every boil, every blemish, every pus-filled wound and disease, every rot and every plague is kept and concocted by Nurgle. This, humorously, keeps Nurgle as a jovial god. He is full of life and laughter, and by creating as many diseases as he possibly can, he shares that joy with mortals. I mean, his envoy is the great unclean one. And look at how happy he is. And there's a lot of him to love. A fear of death in general is feeding Nurgle. All disease makes him stronger, but to pray for salvation for a wounded loved one is to feed Nurgle. The timeless and inevitable fear that one day you will rot and decay is what gives him strength. The Peloton won't feed Nurgle. Licking the doorknob on a public bathroom certainly does. However, should you embrace your grandfather's gifts, you may find an end to your pain.
It tastes like schnozberries. Schnozberries taste like schnozberries.
Maybe. All mortal followers of the Chaos Gods found themselves there in one way or another, either through the direct worship or the slow corrupting of their souls. But those that take Nurgle's gifts and embrace the decay of their bodies may end up being chosen among his few as a faithful servant. In doing so, you will be free of the pain caused by Nurgle's ailments, and you may even find yourself just as jovial and happy as he is. Maybe. His enemies shall wither and die. His allies shall wither and die. The universe and all within it shall wither and die. And when the great corruption has settled over the land and permeated the very foundations of reality itself, then shall the Lord of all rise from the rot and ruin, spread his arms wide to reclaim all of his dutiful children. Those were the three major chaos gods for a very long time, emboldened by war and death on a galactic scale, ever present but now fat on the suffering of a galaxy. One race, for a while, was able to elude the pull of chaos, an advanced race of psychically attuned aliens whose master over the physical world was so strong that chaos could not glean from them the morsels of power they once had, or so they couldn't, not for a long while. 60 million years ago, in an attempt to combat the Necrons and Catan, the Old Ones made a new species. One with innate power in the warp and the ability to harness it with a mastery that was unseen by so many others. A mastery so powerful, the Necrons retreated to sleep in order to wait it out. It was no longer a galaxy to be ruled by them, but instead begin the age of the
Eldar, the Space Elves.
The Eldar are a race of pointed-eared humanoids that are all psychically attuned to the warp. If we're being
Okay, now it's time to bring this up. So Proverbs 30:13. There is a generation that are pure in their own eyes. I'm sorry, this is 12 and 13. And yet is not washed from their filthiness. There is a generation, oh how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up like an elf. But anyways, or a vampire. But there is a generation whose teeth are as swords, and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from the earth and the needy from among men. Very interesting. And also, I do got to bring this up, with the Genesis 6 thing, what was going on, genetic manipulation and hybridization, right? It says they took, in the book of Enoch, they took from, here, I'll bring it up. Anyways.
Out of here, these are space elves, and these elves ruled the galaxy in the time the Necrons went to sleep and humanity began to rise. The Eldar's empire was galaxy-wide and lasted for longer than any other galactic power that we know of. Their understanding of all things was exceptional. With every single one of them being psychers, they had the ability to master the warp and use it to their advantage. See, being a psyker is basically like being a wizard, or I guess in this case it's more of a sorcerer, since you are born with the gifts as opposed to learning them. In order to utilize your psychic abilities, however, you must then reach into the other dimension, into the warp, into hell for that power. So if you were to say, cast fire.
Okay. So this is 1 Enoch chapter 7. It says, and they began to sin against the birds and the beasts and the reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones, right? These Nephilim and all that. So there you go. And then in Jasher chapter 4, it talks about how men were mixing one species of animal with the other. And men. So it was like human/goat, right? Which would be a satyr. Which, when he talks about Slaanesh, we'll get into that. But anyways, I digress. Trying to not make this super long. Your
mind would reach into the warp, gather the strength to rewrite reality, to then cast fireball. Now, you might think to yourself, doesn't that mean if you are opening up a power to the warp, you may create a lot of risk to yourself because of all the horrible things we just talked about in the warp? Yes. However, in Warhammer 40k, willpower is a real, tangible thing, in the sense that in its own right, it can be weaponized. Being strong of will means being strong of soul, and being strong of soul means you can resist the pull of the warp that much more.
Well, and if you think about it, your soul is basically the energy behind the spirit per se, right? So there's a lot of energy, so the more energy you put out there. So anyways, something to think about, I guess. That makes any sense.
An experienced psyker opens up a hole into the warp that is large, and that hole widens to get more power, allowing evil things to get in. A powerful psyker is able to open a very small hole, but with immense force to get this.
Right, so this is why the Bible tells us with the Ephesians 6 thing, right? Put on the whole armor of God so you can withstand in the evil day, right? That's the same scripture that talks about we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities in these spiritual wickedness in high places. Excuse me. That's why God tells us to put on the armor of God daily.
The same amount of power with less risk. The Eldar are master psychers. Every single one of them can call upon the warp, and over millions of years they have perfected it so much so that they can
I'm not touching
anything.
I don't know what's going on.
In some species in the galaxy, they utilize the warp itself for interstellar travel. The Eldar ain't having any of that noise. How about we utilize a fancy alternative mode of travel that is substantially safer than the old ones created, called the webway? What about dying? Miss me with that. We no longer age. And if we do, we can just be reborn like that. Food, water, materials, we make things out of distilled warp essence itself.
Didn't ask.
sing unreality into cathedrals to dine in. What truly could the Eldari Empire possibly fear?
She who thirsts.
The Eldari Empire's biggest fear was themselves, with a society so perfect they wanted for naught, and this led them down dark and dangerous paths. When the base functions of society are no longer a problem for you, you tend to experiment. Perhaps the medium rare steak on your plate would be better if it was elf meat. Hey, I'm not saying we should make cannibalism legal, but like, what's the issue with a little taste?
Back then, you could just imagine it, though. And you'd be good. But anyways, if you don't know, it's what it got to. The Eldar, they could basically imagine something and not necessarily make it appear, but it could be made. And anyways, I don't know if I'm explaining that too well, but basically, they got to the point of psychic, almost to the point of, what's that, replicator type stuff, like in Star Trek. But anyways.
Violent sports is one thing, but how come we don't do sports to the death? I mean, I'm just saying, like, if both participants are willing and clear about it.
I never played Blood Bowl. I should probably check that out.
Like, what really is the problem there, you know? Art is in the eye of the viewer, and what is considered art is completely up to the concept of one's own interest. A canvas adorned with the blood of a man wronged is truly the visual poetry that our society needs. Hedonism. With a slow and consistent hedonism, the Eldar slid backwards into debauchery of the sort I cannot discuss on this YouTube video. Murder on stage, delicacies and drugs distilled from one another, the trade of slaves and concubines, and much worse. The Eldar physiology has their emotions heightened, and they can feel more than a human does. So while it can provide lows of pure despair, it can also provide greater highs than you have ever known. And swinging between the two of them was the Eldar game. The Warp took notice of this heavily, and it began to react. On a galactic scale, the debauchery and the hedonism of the Eldar race caused levels of warp storm so pronounced and so volatile that it cut off interstellar travel for all those who used it. Communications between planets was removed, and a nightmarish era of old night began. This continued for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. The Eldar all but removed from the problems being caused as they entered heights of more and more ecstasy. They needed more and more and more. Nothing.
This is what happens when you have a panic attack.
Nothing was ever enough. More murder, more torture. It's art, it's delicacies, it's life. This silence offends Slaanesh.
Oh, he gave it away.
The
other chaos card.
Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure, she who thirsts.
Okay, this is who I would say is akin to that in the Bible. So this is Isaiah 34:14. The wild beasts of the desert shall also be with the wild beasts of the island, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. The screech owl shall also rest there and find herself a place of rest. Now, there is a species called the screech owl, but in Hebrew, this is, so screech owl, this is the Strong's H3917, and it is Lilith, a female night demon. Noun, short definition of female night demon. The screech owl from Lael, night specter. So if you want to check that out, right there. There you go. That comes from the same chapter. So if you don't, on kjv.org, it gives you the Strong's translations below, so you can check it out. But yeah, so that screech owl, and then it says, there shall the great owl make her nest and lay, hatch, and gather under her shadow. Shall the vultures also be gathered there? There it is. Every one with her mate. So this is a breeding ground, doing all kinds of weird stuff. right? So, that is who I would kin to Slaanesh, in my opinion. Now, of course, Slaanesh, is called the Prince. Also, she who thirsts, right? So, not necessarily, she does have, or it, I guess in paganism, right? To be a god, you had to have both sides, right? The male and the feminine, per se. But anyways.
The god of unspeakable excess is our fourth chaos god with the sacred number of 6.
By the way, go check out Inanna, the goddess Inanna, who looks like a human/owl. She's got owls by her, too, as well. So, there you go. You can just go look up a picture of Inanna.
Adorning their title. Slaanesh is a bit of a tricky one, because with our other 3 chaos gods, there was a certain understanding of human emotions and desires. But for Slaanesh, that desire is how they get their power. The words to be used would be decadence, pleasure, perfection, passion, excess, and many others. The pursuit of more. The want to do more, experience more, become more. That's what gives Slaanesh their gifts. A lot of people believe that Slaanesh is something that originates with sex, specifically, and it makes sense why they assume that. The visuals of Slaanesh patrons are all very lithe and sexual, but they are also intentionally androgynous to appear attractive to a variety of intrigues. However, to think that Slaanesh specifically derives from sex would be mistaken. While it is true that a lot of humanity's actions can relate to getting laid, and Slaanesh is the dark prince of desire, it's more on the lines of feeling an excess of an emotion. It is excessive touch and scent and desire, and a lot of that has to do with sex. That's why it looks like sex, but it's more than just that. A patron of the arts may feed Slaanesh, one that aspires to become the perfect chef or master of their craft, and the sheer pursuit of that alone will feed Slaanesh. Whiplash is Slaanesh's absolute favorite film. Videos where people beat Elden Ring on a dance pad feed Slaanesh.
There are no 2 words in the English language more harmful than good job.
But is there a line?
No, man, no.
This also moves into the concept of feeling. Sensation is a majorly Slaanesh-coded thing. It might start off feeling good, but then you get to play around a little bit, You play with a little bit of pain. Light pain might not be enough, so you might want more.
There is always consequences to every action. Where there's a reaction, or where there's an action, there is a reaction.
More, or inflicting the pain could be your jam. Music can increase to volumes that may hurt your ears, and even then that might not be enough. More. You must have more. Many of the disciples of Slaanesh carry a demonic form in their lithe grace. The Keeper of Secrets is his chosen envoy, and their movements are a blur of dance and pain with an aura all the more fatal. They dance and sing, but there's always a form of malice behind every action they take. An alluring gaze that will pull you in right before the demonic entity can crush you in that grip. Slaanesh's palace has 6 layers surrounding it, and one of them is the excess of gluttony, where the participant finds themselves in a beautiful banquet full of the most delicious foods imaginable. Tables of delicacies and rivers of wine tempt the user to such a degree that they cannot stop stuffing their face, unaware that the things they are eating are very vaguely familiar meat.
Well, stuffing my face would be me. I would definitely be stuffing my face, because I love food.
If one does not see themselves drowning in the river of wine, they may soon fill their bodies up so much that they cease to function and fall over, becoming part of the banquet themselves. That is one of these 6 layers of Slaanesh's palace. This was the ecstasy that the Eldar...
That's the new meaning of a foodie.
our civilization indulged in for millennia, and did so at a monumental scale that they created a god from it. Find pleasure in every moment, indulge in every whim, let lesser races feel the burden of their crude lives. We are beyond such concerns or worries. Every power is ours to use, every sensation ours to experience.
Yeah.
We are truly masters of the galaxy, and all others exist only to satisfy our curiosities. We have earned our position of power. Let us
Basically, every faction in Warhammer 40k.
forever taste the fruits of such achievement. Time itself is ours to command. We are eternal. With the birth of Slaanesh, the Eldari Empire ceased to be. A catastrophic event so horrible that the warp ripped a hole permanently in our reality. A fissure forever known as the Eye of Terror. With the sudden inhalation
Can we get a moment of silence for Katia? All right.
of this god's largest breath, the Eldari souls are a currency to be now collected by she who thirsts. Trillions of Eldar died in an instant, Slaanesh gorging on their souls to satisfy his palate. 99.9% of their entire species died, and the rest are doomed to a fate worse than death. For Slaanesh now stakes a claim on each and every Eldar soul. From the moment they pass on, an eternity of torment awaits them. The remaining Eldar devote their entire lives to stopping this eventuality, their dying race so devoted to saving themselves from the Dark Prince, and in doing so, have found very creative ways. In the modern world of Warhammer, the Craftworld Eldar are the main force of Eldar in the galaxy and represent the elf style that many think of when you think elves in space.
So the New Jerusalem in the Bible is kind of like a craft world, right? It can descend, it descends into the earth, right? I'm sure it can also ascend. In the book of Enoch, it talks about how he can see the path of the stars on the ceiling and everything like that, which is interesting. And then there's these 12 portals, right? These 12 gates, but they're portals. The book of Enoch literally calls them portals and tongues of fire. So in the craft worlds have warp gates, right? And then Jesus says, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. So you're going to be living in this place as well. So there you go. The New Jerusalem is something like a craft world to an extent.
Fantasy elves in space, not those elves. We'll get to them. A craft world is a monumentally large starship, the size of a continent, that acts as a form of flotilla. During the highest reaches of hedonism, many Eldar saw the demonic writing on the wall and began to try and seek asylum from their own debauchery. Those Eldar left on monumental craft worlds into the far reaches of the galaxy and saved themselves from Slaanesh's awakening. The main thing the craft world Eldar seek is to temper their minds and bodies in a way that will never allow them to slide back into their old ways. The representation they carry is that of a more feudal Japanese motif. Eldar follow paths as they age, the path of the warrior, the seer, the poet, the diplomat, the bone singer, and so on. These paths are a strict code of conduct to hone the heightened Eldar psychology down a school of thought and action. And if it sounds a hell of a lot like Bushido, well, you're damn right. Here's a medal and a soul stone. Don't lose it or an eternity of torment awaits you. Going through these paths will allow you to take up not just a role in Eldar society, but keep your mind clear from the past worries that plagued them. Every Eldar is said to be a psyker,
and to guard you from becoming a Drukari.
However, very few of them actually utilize their psychic powers for fear of tempting she who thirsts. A large amount of emphasis is also put on ancestors of the Eldar and learning from them the farther you go down a path. This can sometimes be seen by the large variety of jewels adoring the armor of Eldar. Those are called soul stones, the biggest middle finger to Slaanesh they can think of. See, when an Eldar dies, these stones act as a backup. And
I literally thought that was that was a Harlequin sticking a middle finger up. Nice.
instead of their souls going to Slaanesh, they are then trapped and stored in this little stone. So when the Eldar say they commune with their ancestors, they mean so very literally, as the spirit and soul of generations before them are stored here. Often larger structures may contain vast amounts of soul stones, such as the Infinity Circuit in the Craftworld itself, allowing the souls of the dead to help power their enormous starship. The young do not desire the discipline of the path, but rather their curiosity drives them to try every fruit from the tree. Thus, it is that so many take the path of wandering or the path of damnation in their first years of adulthood. And so, the great tragedy of our kind is played out again and again as the number of our people shrink from generation to generation. These paths, when completed, allow an Eldar to move to the next one, then the next one. However, since this is the grim darkness of the world, many of these paths rely on combat. The Eldar actually had gods at one point: Cain, Vol, Isha, Azaryan, and so on. These gods are aspects of the Eldar pantheon, and while many were killed in Slaanesh's creation, their teachings live on. For some, the strongest devotion to the Eldar gods is to join the Aspect Warriors and embody the wrath of Cain, their god of war. While guardians of the Eldar Craftworlds are more akin to a trained militia, the Aspect Warriors embody a particular variant of the path. Each are led by a Phoenix Lord, a name passed down from generations and embodying the souls of prior Phoenix Lords with each new one. The Howling Banshee.
That would be the Seraphim, right there. The burning ones, right? But anyways, I digress.
Led by Jane Zar, Fugin and his fire dragons, Baharoth and his swooping hawks, or Malgan Ra and his dark reapers. Each aspect shrine carries with it the Eldar way of war. Fast, hard-hitting, and incredibly tricksy, for they do not have the numbers to fight in any other way.
And I should say that Asciani and not all the Eldar on the Craftworlds. Sorry. I know I made it sound like that, so I apologize. Anyways.
The Craftworld Eldar show how mangled an empire can be by their own actions. They once ruled the galaxy in an honest, non-hyperbolic way, but in the end, they were bested by themselves, and their most prominent remnants are forced to drift aimlessly through the galaxy, trying to save their species from extinction and resist the temptations of she who thirsts. But for some, the party, it's just beginning.
Here comes the Drukari.
Deep within the webway is the city of Kamara. This dark.
All right. So, of course, we're going to go back to the Proverbs one. So you got the generation. Oh, how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. But here, we'll get into this. There's a generation whose teeth are as swords, and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, and the needy from among men. The horse leech hath 2 daughters, crying, Give, give. There are 3 things that are never satisfied. Yea, 4 things say not, it is enough. Sounds just like the Drukari, doesn't it? But anyways.
Dark City once existed as a port in the webway that allowed for ease of transport for the Eldar between its various domains. The significance of this city meant that it needed to be a bit more of a neutral territory outside of the jurisdiction of general Eldar law.
Darktide has some pretty good music to it, though, man. You got to give it that.
And therefore, it was allowed to self-govern. This did not go well. The Dark City became the hideaway for all manner of sin. The Eldar race slipped into debauchery on a galactic scale that it birthed a god, and this was the city you went to when that wasn't enough for you. The convenience of being so deep within the webway was that it exists as a blind spot to the horrors of the warp. So while the rest of the Eldar fled the downfall of their species, Kamara kept partying. When Slaanesh was birthed, they were saved the worst of it, thanks to them being nice and neatly tucked away inside the webway. but only somewhat. The Dark Prince did not have a grip
Just a little
around
bit.
their soul, but the tiniest pinky finger, and they were still pulling. But due to their excess hedonism, they found a solution to this problem. If they tormented others, they could temporarily rejuvenate their souls and continue to cheat their inevitable death by placating the Prince of Pleasure. And if they kept this up on the regular, they could effectively become immortal. Thus, the Drukari were born. Unlike the more
And the bad guys from World War II. Anyways, JK.
stoic elves you see in works of fiction, the Drukari themselves exist as a sort of analog of the more grim and fiendish elves you find in Norse and European mythology. The Drukari are soul vampires, but the more basic means to feed are hardly enough to keep them going. This desire to feed is known as the thirst, and to quench it effectively, they have mastered the art of biotechnology.
A lot of the dark elf mythology and stuff comes from Norse and quite a bit of like little bit of Mesopotamia and stuff like that, but a lot of it at least the modern day comes from Norse mythology and stuff like that, which is interesting, which it also has tie into Hela, right? And of course this deep character. But anyways, I digress.
Technology and dark sciences to really juice themselves up on the crispy soul sprite from the vending machine called the Galaxy. The majority of Drukari act as pirates and raiders and slavers. They go into our physical reality and drag people back to Kamara to commit atrocities that go beyond any imaginative torture a human can think of. The Drukari are organized in various groups throughout the Dark City to accomplish this in a more organized and extremely brutal way. The Cabals act as the main warriors of the city, led by the...
And you think about it, this is what in paganism they were doing, right? They would offer up and do all kinds of debaucherous stuff to appease their god, right? And a lot of that comes from that first Enoch verse, right? Where it says, and they were devouring each other's flesh and all that stuff, drinking the blood. And they were creating these entities, a lot of them, just to eat them and stuff like that. And what does it say too? It says they turned on men and mankind because they couldn't get, they basically enslaved mankind. But anyways,
their archons, witches and succubi act as entertainment for Kamara in gladiatorial arenas, and the flesh-crafting homunculus keep the Drukari alive and discover ever-increasingly more painful ways to torment their ever-increasingly large supply of slaves they are brought. The Dark Eldar see the other inhabitants of the galaxy as little more than cattle, livestock that can be brought to bay or slaughtered at any time.
Okay, so that chapter 7 in First Enoch, right? And they became talking about and they became pregnant, and they bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells, very tall, by the way, who consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against the birds, the beasts, the reptiles, and fish, to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. That's where all the, human sacrifice and stuff comes from. But anyways, at least in my opinion.
Their fodder, however, is not meat and muscle, but the anguish and despair of the weak. The Dark Eldar do indeed drink blood, but also tears, and most sustaining of all, the raw essence of pain they wring out of their captives. The truth of the matter is that Drukari sustain themselves on the suffering of others, not just morally, but physically. Kamara is a city rife with backstabbing schemes and murder. It is the worst back alleys of the worst ghettos at the best of times. Nothing is more horrifying to a Drukari than death, for death will see them in the talons of Slaanesh for an eternity of torment. So they do everything they can to stop this. The homunculi covens regrow dead members from pieces of flesh as bargaining chips. The succubi create grisly gladiatorial spectacles that literally rejuvenate the audience members as captives are murdered for sport. To be captured by the Drukari is one of, if not the worst fate imaginable in the world of Warhammer 40k. In a universe built on war crimes, they are the most debased war crimers of all time. To be tortured and sacrificed in the gladiatorial arenas is a...
All right, we're going to end it there. And we're going to do a part 2 of this. And we're also probably going to do the same thing when Bricky's part 2 comes out. Since mine end up being a little bit longer than most because I bring the biblical stuff, I'm just going to split this in 2 parts. So I'll do the next part the next time. That way it's not too long and like 3 hours long or something like that. So anyways, I want to thank everybody for watching this video. And I want to thank everybody who likes the video and those who didn't like the video. Thank you for at least giving me a chance. I don't mean that tongue-in-cheek either. And I just appreciate everybody for 700 subscribers. Thank you guys. I mean, there ain't much I can say other than thank you. You know, it's all because of you guys. And we're growing a lot more than I ever have before. And I have you guys to thank. So, thank you. And you guys have a wonderful day.